Welcome to Speaking of Jazz with Manny Kelloug, and in association with jazztribe.news. Now let's get started.
Well, jazz lovers, I'd like to say once again, hello to you. And I want to remind you that you are listening to Speaking of Jazz, and I'm Manny Kelloug, your host. I'm coming your way each week with different guests on my show. This week, I am so excited and delighted to have the man, the maestro. He used to be the musical director and arranger for the late, great Mr. Marvin Gaye. Also, he is a educator. He's a mentor. He's a jazz lover. As a matter of fact, we go back over 50 years, and I plan to take you back that far if possible and bring us up to where we are now. Leslie and I have known each other for at least 45 years plus, and I'm very delighted to have him, and I want to stop talking and introduce my dear guest and friend to the show this week. Hello, my good friend, Mr. Leslie Drayton.
Hey there. It's more than 45 plus. It's at least 50 years.
Is that what it is?
Let's say 1970, 71.
Oh, I'll go for that. Yes, sir. It's at least that.
It's at least that long.
You know, it's amazing. We've known each other for 50 years, and I've never really had a chance, or we've never had the opportunity until now to really just talk about some things that brought us to where we are now. And I'd like to start off, Leslie, and I'd like for you to kind of tell the guests and the listeners where you're from and bring us up on your education and how you got started, man. Go ahead, it's your show.
Well, I was born in Los Angeles, in a section of town at that time that was called the East Side.
Yes, sir.
You know it better, but it was 48th and San Pedro, near a park called South Park.
Yes.
Right around the corner. And in our neighborhood, it's very interesting. I didn't remember, but I remembered one of my other friends reminded me that Barry White actually lived 2 doors away. That's a door and a half away. His mother used to rent a house in the back of 2 houses over. There were a lot of musicians that lived on our street over the years. Melba Liston lived there. Gerald Wilson lived there. My father was a professional bass player. So I grew up there. I went to an elementary school, West Vernon Avenue School. Went to John Adams Junior High School and LA High School.
Yeah.
And I think I met you, like I say, early 70s, because we were in bands we weren't bands, but they were in the same neighborhood. You were in a band called Rhythm Rebellion. I was in one called New Perspective.
I remember that.
You were at Mavericks Flat, and we were at Checkmate Club.
Checkmate, around the corner.
Yes. So what really got me interested in music, although I'd been around, I took piano lessons as a kid, but I was in the high school band, and I was well on my way to being an architect. And they put me in the band when I got into 10th grade, and I went to the counselor and I said, according to what this curriculum says, I don't have a gym class. And the counselor says, if you're in the band, you don't have to take gym. I said, well, that's nice. I'll stay in the band. So some guys in that band were in a youth band at a place called Grant's Music Center.
Yes, Mr. Grant.
Yes. And they didn't have enough trumpet players in the band. They had a big band over there. And they said, would you like to come one Saturday? And I think I was 15 years old. And I asked my mother to take me over there to this rehearsal on a Saturday morning. And between the time of about 10 and 12:30, the light came on as, this is what I want to do. And from that point on, I was on a mission. I went to my mother. I said, I think I want to play trumpet. I want to be a musician. And I said, I need to play better. And she said, find out where your friends take lessons from. And they gave me the name of a teacher by the name of Jane Sager. She was in Hollywood. And I started with her. at Grant's Music Center, we were introduced to, actually he did, second week we were there, he took all of us after the rehearsal and he introduced us on how to start writing. And there may have been 10 people in the room. And I think only 2 or 3 of us really, really kept on. And I found that that's my gift. Not that it was a natural thing, but there was a lot of ease in me learning how to write. And I started working in their music store, and there was a business upstairs called the Script House. And these guys did what they call music preparation, a music copying, and that's taking parts off of a score and creating individual parts. And the gentleman that owned the place came downstairs one day and he said, "It's time for you to come upstairs." And I said, "What does that mean?" He says, "Well, you come here one Saturday." So there again, I got permission from people at Grant's. I asked my mother, "Can you take me up there one Saturday morning?" She said, "Yes." Now this is, I think I was 15, 16, and it was time for me to get driver's license. And the driver's license said, "Well, you need to pay for the insurance." And the insurance was $600 there. And I used to make $4 an hour in the music store. So that Saturday morning, next Saturday, she took me up to Grant's. I mean, not to Mary and Sherelle's place, the Script House. And there were 2 of us there. A gentleman that became a well-known producer by the name of Sagidi, is Carl Dyson. And he taught us this actually a skill of copying music. And at the end of the day, that day, he gave me $100.
Really?
He gave Sagidi $100. And I was pretty good at math. And I said, "Mr. Sherelle, can I come back next week?" Because I figured I would have the money for insurance by the end of the summer. At $4 an hour, I would have still been working for it. So that was an invaluable experience. And what I found out when I reflect back on things that have happened in a very beneficial way in life, I tell young people, I said, you never know what eyes and ears are on you. So you always need to do your best, because there again, most things that have happened very, very beneficial were as a result of a phone call, someone observing something and reaching out to me. Mary and Sherelle was also instrumental in me meeting Maurice White. Again, I was working in the Script House. I was out with this man, and Maurice had come to town and he wanted to put this band together. And I got a call from Maurice. "Are you interested in joining this band?" I said, "Okay." So there were there were 4 of us that joined that band that weren't from Chicago. And 3 of us were in that same band that were at the Checkmate Club. Alex Thomas, Michael Beal played guitar, and me. Then one of my high school buddies, Carl Randall, was the original saxophone player. So that's how that started. And that lasted, a couple of years or so, 2 or 3 years. Then just moved on. I decided to move on, and they decided to move on and do something different. But that's without going in great detail, that takes you up to maybe early 70s or so. That's how I got started in the business. And during that time, I did go to Cal State LA and got a degree in music ed. So I got a BA from Cal State LA.
Okay.
So again, what else you need to know there?
Well, I'm sitting back listening, man. I'm reminiscing actually.
Yeah.
Well, back then, who were some of your influences? Who really grabbed you around the neck and made you listen? Let's talk about that.
Well, happened in a number of ways. Okay, that trumpet teacher was very instrumental in me getting a good foundation. She mentioned at a point to listen to Miles Davis' Sketches of Spain. I also had a teacher that taught me improv, and he suggested I listen to certain records. And when I go up and ask Mary and Sherelle, I really did have this thirst for learning certain things. And there was always music around the house. I mean, I just came up listening to music around the house. So I would say that my first influences, and I'll get back to more current, my mother was a big fan of Dinah Washington.
Okay.
Probably not a Dinah Washington record that I don't know completely.
I love Dinah Washington.
Yeah. Once, and she would take me around. My father died when I was very young, when I was 3, but there were always musicians around. He came to LA from New York with Benny Carter. So Benny Carter is the first person that gave me the first trumpet. He says, I'll give you a trumpet when you're 11. And I called him up one day. I called him Uncle Benny. I said, I'm ready for that trumpet. I wasn't interested in playing. I was just collecting on a promise that he made to me. There were people that I heard play. Naturally, she used to take me out to see Gerald Wilson's band. And I used to say to him, I want to be in your band one day.
Yeah.
He was watching. So I was about 19, he made a call. Across the street from us was a very well-known, probably one of the top 5 female musicians of the last century. Melba Liston was a great trombone player and arranger. And I call her my musical mother. She had gone to New York to play with Quincy and Dizzy Gillespie, and she would come back to town. I mean, it was a big deal when she would come back. And I was in high school. I didn't have to go to school the day she was in town. That was like a holiday. But as I got a little older and I was writing, she turned out to be a great mentor. And then when I was struggling with something, I would go to where she was staying, was at her mother's place. And I would sit at the piano and I would try to work out something, and she would never say anything. She would just listen.
Mm-hmm.
After about 2 hours, I would say, I'm really struggling with this. And she said, why don't you just move your left hand to that note and do this? And I said, oh, okay. And I looked at her one day after I was doing that. I said, how come you didn't tell me that 2 hours ago? But what I discovered with that is that there was a very important lesson with that. She was allowing me to find my own way.
Yes, sir.
And there again is something I share with folks. So Melba Liston's great influence. The music that I heard, naturally, I heard Cannonball's band. I got to go see Cannonball's band at a place called the Lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
When I got a little
Howard Rumsey's Lighthouse.
Yes, sir. The early trumpet influences were Harry Sweets Edison.
Yes, sir.
Freddie Hubbard. I did not understand Miles Davis at that time, nor Dizzy Gillespie. And I liked Freddie Hubbard over Lee Morgan. So
Okay.
for the early influences, I think after a while, Blue Mitchell became probably the primary influence. I heard Clifford Brown. All those people were influences as far as trumpet playing went. The other aspiration was, we knew that being a studio musician was something to aspire to because of the monetary reward. So that was another goal. I didn't want to be a studio musician. And everyone says you need to learn how to sight read music the first time and play it right.
That's right.
So we did that. I mean, our peer group actually made that a goal. Funny thing happened. One time we were on a recording session, and one of the top trumpet players at that time was on that session. And the music was changing to be a bit more syncopated towards funk rhythms and those types of rhythms. And I'm figuring he's a great sight reader. He's not going to miss anything. And we played that piece of music down, and he missed something. I said, you need to be able to play it absolutely correctly on the first time. Because I proudly said, Mr. So-and-so, you missed that part over there in bar 12. Well, he didn't like that. But, so I understood that's a nice bar to have. However, it's not completely accurate. I mean, you really do learn how to read very well. So it was a combination of all of those things for me. Playing the trumpet well, And so the writing thing started to blossom. The early first couple of Earth, Wind, and Fire albums, I did the arranging, the horn arranging on those things. So the various influences. As far as other music, I was thinking about Sly and the Family Stone was a big influence, just hearing their records.
Yeah.
Bob Marley. James Brown, not so much. Let's see who else. War. That was another band I really liked. War. I liked the music that used to come out of Philadelphia. Those things that Tom Bell did.
The Philly sound.
Yes, all of that. That Philly sound. Motown. I was around. There was another person. Clarence Paul was another person that introduced me into things. There again, he was a friend of the family. I think the very first recording session that I did where I got paid union scale was something he called me one day, one afternoon. Look, come down to the studio. There's a session. Somebody didn't show up or something. And that was, so there were always these eyes and ears on me. They taught me about that. They taught me business. They taught me life. There were a lot of lessons there with those folks. Actually, I spent a lot of time, you probably did too. I don't know. Did you go over to Bollick Sound, Ike and Tina Turner studio much?
Yes, I did. I sure did.
I spent a lot of time over there at night.
Yes.
Over and listen. I would go over and listen. They had an engineer over there by the name of Ron Malo, who ended up being the chief engineer at A&M Records.
I know that name.
Yeah.
Yes.
So whenever I had some idle time, I was hanging out just wherever I thought some music was happening that was of interest to me. So there you have it.
Man, this is, like I said, this is fantastic, man. You're taking me back. And I'm not through with you yet because I want to dig a little deeper. And this next question, my man, to you is almost like a two-part question, if you please. And first part of it is, who are the artists that you have worked with? And I'm gonna start right there because there's a gap, and I know you have a lot to tell us about right there. The artists that you have worked with, and I know you did quite a stint with the late legendary Mr. Marvin Gaye. Let's start there.
Marvin, my experience with Marvin came after my tenure with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Melville Liston and I had, believe it or not, we had a big band. And we pooled our resources together and we recorded a master. And Marvin at the time, this is probably 1972, 73, was about to start a record label. And he bought our masters to release on his label. And that's how I met Marvin. I'm thinking 72, 73, late 72, 73. So when he was about to do his live album in Oakland, I got a call from him. He says, man, I want to do a medley. I want you to do this arranging on this medley. I said, okay, man. And Marvin was people ask me, how was Marvin to work with? Marvin was one of the most creative people I've ever worked with. He was one of the most stubborn people I've ever worked with. But he could be very diplomatic and democratic about things.
Okay.
So I did this arrangement, but to give you how a workflow would work, many times it would be on a telephone conversation because we didn't have Zoom or anything like that. And I would be at a piano at the apartment. I had moved away. I was in an apartment by this time. And he was living in Topanga Canyon and we'd be working on something. And we get to a point and I would say, hey man, I think this is what should go here. He says, well, I think this is what should go here. And we would lock heads for quite a while. And this is later on in the time with him. I'll get to the point of when I work with him. started being a musical director. So depending on my state of mind, I could be stubborn about things as well. Sounds and what notes he liked in a chord. And so if things were not being resolved, I would pretend like my hand or my elbow slipped, and I would play that note that I knew he would like. What's that? I said, oh man, let me play that again. He said, let's use that. So, okay, we solved that problem. So we move on to the next spot. So many times the tune would have 3 spots in it where the same thing would happen. So the resolution would be, he said, the first time, let's use my idea. Okay. He said, second time, let's use your idea. He said, the third time, let's think of something new. Win-win. And he did that quite a bit. I mean, he was great at, he's going to get his point across, let you have your input, and then there's another opportunity. Let's think of something different. So that would be win-win. So after doing this arrangement in 1974 on the first live album, he offered me an opportunity to go out and conduct for him. They were going to go to Jamaica. And I put this small orchestra together. And there were some things that happened politically that I had no control over. And that didn't come to pass. And I had him come to the rehearsal. He had to announce to these guys that this gig wasn't going to happen. And that also started a game of what I call one-upsmanship all the time, because he wanted me to tell these people. And I said, no, you need to come to the rehearsal, man. You need to check out, see what we've done, et cetera, et cetera. And he came to the rehearsal late. And I said, Marvin has something to say to you. And he could speak very softly at times. And he explained to them that this gig wasn't going to happen. And Blue Mitchell, great jazz trumpet player, was in the trumpet section.
Yes, Blue Mitchell.
In fact, he said, speak up, I can't hear you. So Marvin had to speak a little louder. He had to announce to them. He says, what are you going to do? He says, I'll pay you guys for all the rehearsal. That's fine. There's some resolution there. And after these musicians left, he was still there. He says, well, why didn't you tell me? You didn't tell him. I said, man, I wasn't going to tell those guys there wasn't no gig. You've been promising me. So the deal was he went to Jamaica and he explained to me, he's trying to be diplomatic. He says, well, man, that's not going to happen. I'll buy you a new suit or something like that. I said, man, I don't need a suit. I need a chance. And I think I had tears in my eyes that day. So there was a tour that happened, 74. I got the call. And I was his conductor and musical director for 1974, 75, 76. And I did do the second live album, the one at the London Palladium, and then we parted ways.
The big one.
Yeah. But that was a great experience. Marvin was probably the best experience musically because Marvin had a great sensibility for jazz. And I was still coming from that place. And that was fine. And we could be somewhat adventurous with the music that we wrote. I made sure that musically, as much as I could every night, that band or orchestra that we had was going to sound good. And sometimes we would go to such cities and we'd have a problem. I'd go tell him, I say, man, look, you might get to this tune, you may not hear this part because they can't play that. And we were fine with each other. Utmost respect for him. When his voice was on it, there was no greater voice that you could hear. There were times when he would sound like a fifth grade singer, depending on what was going on. So it could go one way or the other, but it was a wonderful experience. After that,
did you ever do any jazz tunes with Marvin? I know he wanted to be a jazz vocalist. Did you ever experience that? Did you ever get into any of that?
There was a time when Jacqueline Onassis was still alive. There was a nonprofit organization that she was involved with in New York, and they had a big event called the Moon Lady Ball. And they wanted to give him an award. And we did an arrangement of Duke Ellington's Sophisticated Lady.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know what happened to the music, and it never got performed.
Really?
Other than at rehearsal. It was one of the first times that Marvin did a no-show. The whole band, not the whole band, the rhythm section went to New York. We went to Waldorf Astoria. The event was in the Waldorf Astoria. They had a nice orchestra for us to play. We rehearsed that arrangement. The arrangement was, it was funky, but it was still jazz.
Yeah.
He did a no-show, and people panicked and said, well, what are we going to do? And I said, well, tell you what. I said, I know the melody to Save the Children. And I said, I'll play that on trumpet. And I played it on trumpet that night. And man, we had this orchestra behind us, and the lights went down low, and they put this pin spotlight on me, and I'm playing this tune. I said, oh. I think I don't want to have my back turned to the audience anymore. I think I would like to face the audience.
Yeah.
That light came on as well for me to just expand my horizons to be my own individual artist. During that time I worked with Marvin, there were times when we see the creative part of things come out in him. We were at concert somewhere and the power went out. And he was actually an excellent pianist, and he was an excellent drummer. Played on a lot of those early Motown records. So he had to sit down to the piano and just play and sing. So then that's where that other part came out with the jazz influence. But it was never like, we were never going to play a bebop tune with him. There was a time when there was an interest from Miles Davis to do something with Marvin. And I tried my best to put those two together, and it just never happened. I don't know whether Marvin had fear of Miles. I don't know what happened. I would go to New York, and I never met Miles on the issue. Marvin was aware that there was an interest. It just never happened. There were, let me think, people would come to our shows. One memorable experience was we were doing these cool jazz festivals. Dizzy Gillespie was the opening act during that year. And Dizzy would come to our concert every week, and he would listen. And he said to me, he says, I like this music. It is different than that I know. That is a quote. I said, well, okay, man, cool. So one night he came to me, he says, I want to sit in with the band. I said, okay. And this was during the middle of the show. So I went up to Marvin, I whispered in his ear, I said, Dizzy wants to sit in. And Marvin said, okay. So I went back to Dizzy. I said, okay, man, there's after the dance, there's what's going on and something else. I said, what key are they in? I said, they in the key of E. And he says, oh, shh. I said, just pick you one. They're all in the key of E from here on out. E is not the easiest key for a trumpet player to play in. Dizzy happened to pick After the Dance. And After the Dance had chord progression that was not a usual chord progression. He jumped in, he started playing. He didn't sound very good. And the other trumpet player in the band, Dizzy was his idol. And he said, man, did you hear that? I said, yeah. He sounded like S. I said, yeah. This is Leslie, man. He sounded like S. I said, yeah. I mean, that's my idol. I said, hey, man, he was out of his element. I said, how would you sound if you were in his element? But shortly after that, Dizzy had gone back to Lalo Schifrin, and there was an album that came out that was kind of like the music that we did, but more things that were more comfortable for him. But all he had to do was say, hey, I'd like to work with you guys. We would have hooked him up fine. But Dizzy was really, really interested in the sound of this music. And he knew it was different. And it was, it had elements of what he knew, but of chord changes just moved in different places. But Marvin he listened to jazz, but we never did that on our shows. There was enough other music that we always had, we'd had to decide on what we would do each year in the shows. We would update things.
Right.
But during that time, we did a concert with Quincy Jones. There again, eyes and ears. There was a time when we weren't working. It was right before the last year I worked with Marvin. I worked with Quincy Jones for 6 months. We were very close. Quincy doesn't drive a car, so I had to go pick him up every morning and go to the studio. He was working on Brothers Johnson album, the one with, and the Leslie Gore albums. So we got to be very close during that time. But it was time for Marvin to go back, and I had more of an allegiance to Marvin than I had with Quincy.
Sure. Well, I'm just sitting here, man, just soaking this all in. Who are some of the people that you're working with now?
No one in particular. There is a project that's, I would say it's ongoing. It hasn't really begun, but during the late 70s, but during actually before all the period before Marvin and Earth, Wind and Fire and all of that, I met Harvey Fuqua, who was one of those early Motown producers. He was producing a group called New Birth.
I remember that.
And I did string arrangements on 2 tunes that they had that were hits. It's Been Such a Long Time and Wildflower. So Harvey and I kept this relationship through the years. And when he moved up to Bay Area, he was working with an artist by the name of Sylvester.
I remember Sylvester.
Was quite during the disco era. And I did 2 or 3 albums with Sylvester. Even the group that was the offshoot of that was called the 2 Tons of Fun, who became the Weather Girls. I think I did 1 or 2 albums with them. There's someone who is in the process of trying to get a movie produced on Sylvester. And I've been working kind of as a musical consultant because I'm probably one of the few people that's still alive from that era, or if the other people are alive, they're not actively playing. So I work on my own projects now. I do every year part of the mentorship part of what I do. I am an instructor at the Grammy camps that is sponsored by the Grammy Foundation.
Okay.
Come in and learn. High school kids come, they're 14 to 19. They come and learn about the music business. It's not a performance camp. And some people think it's a performance camp, but there are 7 career tracks. Let me see if I get them right. I'm gonna hold my fingers up. So there's actually instrumental performance, singer-songwriter, singer, music journalism, music business, electronic music production, and video production. So they can come and learn any of those 7 aspects of the music business.
Okay.
Believe it or not, I just saw on the new Kendrick Lamar album, there's a young man by the name of Jahan Sweet, came to that camp about 10 years ago, and we knew, and I was still living in LA. I said, hey man, he was in Florida. And I said, man, if you were to leave Florida, you could come to LA and work. He was that good in high school. I think he's producer on maybe one of those tunes. There's a songwriter who had come to a camp we did. I ran this camp in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Her name is Ava Sapelsa. She's in Nashville.
Okay.
Very, very good songwriter. Some of the young people that come to the camp realize they're not going to be performers, and they have taken the track to do things in publishing and other aspects of the business. Some of them I keep up with, some I don't keep up with, but those two stick out more than others because I had direct interaction with them. But that's an exciting thing. That's going to happen in this year. For 2 years, we did it virtually, which was very difficult to have a band doing things virtually. But the kids were fine. They understood the technology and they would submit music at night. I'd put it together in Logic and they would listen to what they've done. But we'll be on the campus of USC first week of August. And that's usually where it happens in LA. And
USC, I'm a Trojan. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's in our old neighborhood.
Yes, sir.
So it's nice to go back and visit the old neighborhood, which has changed since we were kids. But that's something I get really excited about. And then since I've been in Houston, I do things with my own band from time to time. And what I enjoy doing is I went over to a couple of schools, and if I saw someone that looked promising, I said, man, come hang with me.
Yeah, very good.
Mentees is just graduating from Cal State LA. In fact, I encouraged him to leave Houston. He went to LA, he just got his BA from Cal State LA. He's going to go to Manhattan School of Music and work on his master's degree. I mean, all of this is happening at the moment. He'll start in the fall. There's another guitar player that's finishing his BA at TSU, at Texas Southern. So I enjoy doing that. I mean, if I find folks, depending on personalities are different now than they've been when we were young people, and the thirst for knowledge is different than when we were younger. Like I said, I would hang out as much as I could, and I would ask a lot of questions from my elders. Sometimes you don't get that from younger people. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Last couple of generations, it's a little different.
I got a question for you. Out of all of the recording studios that you have worked in, recorded in, which studio did you like or enjoy recording in the most?
There was, the one where I learned the most was not the most elaborate one. There was a studio on 54th Street called CBA Recording.
I know that one too.
Yeah. Ollie Brown and Ray Clark owned this studio. And that's where I learned the skills of recording. I actually recorded a couple of hit records there. A lot of people did. So as far as where I had the most fun was that studio. I tell stories of how that place was very tenuous at times. If it rained, it had a leak in the roof. It never rained on the console. It would rain, the water would hit everywhere else but on the console. So we were just blessed there.
Yeah.
There have been other studios where naturally you've had all the bells and whistles. I mean, Capitol Records is one of those places that has all the bells and whistles. That I've worked on other projects there. There was another one that one of the albums that I did that turned out to be very successful. This place was on Melrose. It was called Fiddler. I met an engineer there who I was very suspect of when I met him. He was a young man who looked like a skinhead back in the middle 80s. And the guy who owned the place says, man, spend some time with him. He's really good. And I'd go in there. And I used to have, Tony Motster was the guy who did my work for me back then from CBA. And Tony was making a transition into doing, working in an electronics place where he was developing electronics. And sometimes he couldn't make the session. And he didn't make a session one day. So I was kind of stuck with this engineer that the owner told me about. And it turned out to be a great experience. I didn't know how good he was. And he would experiment with sounds and things that were way beyond anything I wanted to use at the time. But there again, there were eyes and ears on him, and there was a very, very successful, busy pop producer at the time who had chance to hear him or was recommended this engineer to this guy, and he had a nice career as a engineer working with this guy. He's still around. We've reconnected in LA. The largest studios you have, Westlake, that's where I work with Quincy. All those have all the vessels, but those weren't for my projects. Coming to Houston, the very last project that I did, most of it I did at home, except for the drums and percussion and mixing. So I had to go into, there's only really one great studio in Houston, believe it or not. And I found an engineer there that I have the utmost respect for. I mean, he's just as good as anybody that I've encountered over the years. And he's very quick. He knows all the modern technology. He's close to my age. We have some of the same reference points. But what I learned at CBA and also working with Tony, and I've watched Tony go in somewhere because Tony would go in, and Tony was a very quiet guy, and people would never think Tony was very capable. And Tony would sit down at the SSL board, and after about 30 minutes, before he'd come in, somebody would say, "Does your guy know what he's doing?" I said, "Oh, yeah." Mm-hmm. And he would say, after about 30 minutes, says, "What's his name again?" And we would just, and because Tony knew how to just ask a couple of questions, and he was off and running. So Tony does some live sound now, but if something came up now, and I had to go out of town, I would reach out to the engineer here and ask him whether he would go with me. I don't know whether he would. I haven't seen him last year and a half or so, but I had utmost respect for him. And I've worked with Bruce Swedeen on down. I remember when Bruce Swedeen started with Quincy. I remember the first day he showed up.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. So there you have it. I mean, it's a lot of it is if the equipment is somewhat, well, it doesn't need to be current equipment. It's just if someone needs to use what they have, because a lot of the digital equipment is nothing but a digital rendering of the old analog equipment.
Right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question before we go into our little identification break here.
Okay.
What are some of the most funniest stories that you can tell us? I know you can't tell everything, but what are some of the most funniest stories that you can share with us in your travels?
This is one where actually no plane was involved. Kind of, but he ended up being a good friend of mine. He's a very good trombone player by the name of Garnett Brown. And very innovative jazz trombone player. And he moved to LA. And for some reason, I had gone over his house one day for something. And as I was leaving, there was this guy walking up. And the guy looked familiar. And he and Garnett were good friends. So he introduced the guy as William. This is William. I said, "Hey, man," I said, "I think I know you from somewhere." He said, "Well, perhaps." And Garnett says, "Well, maybe you know him from the celluloid." I said, "No, man." And I didn't quite know what celluloid meant at the moment. He said, no, man, somewhere you and I have some friends or something. I've seen you somewhere. I'm going through this. And so when I went away, man, and about an hour later, he was introducing me to Billy D. Williams.
Okay.
How funny. Let me see. Let me see. Well, with Dizzy, Dizzy was quite a prankster. And when we met Dizzy in 1974 in Toronto. We were doing a concert that Dizzy was there, and he came to hang out. I don't even know if he came to the show. And I think I knew what Dizzy looked like. So he came up and he introduced himself. He says, "Hello, my name is Kozinski." I'm thinking, okay, Kozinski. Yes, Kozinski. Nice to meet you. Oh, there again, I had to go ask somebody else. I said, "Man, wasn't that Dizzy?" He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Dizzy's just always playing with people, man." So those are the nice, clean stories.
Yeah, I can dig it, man. We all have them stories that we can keep clean, and then we have the ones that we just keep to ourselves.
Yeah. One other one. I think when we were in London, right before we did the recording for the London, we done a rehearsal. We had some time in between, and Odell Brown was one of the keyboard players. He said, "Let's go to this pub and have a drink." So I said, "Okay, man." So we dressed for the show, and I had this gray wool suit, light gray wool suit. So we go down to the pub, man, and it wasn't far from the theater, and it started raining. We didn't have any raincoats or umbrellas, and I said, "Man, let's call a cab." I said, "Man, we only got about 10 minutes. We need to be back." So we said, "Man, we have to walk back." So needless to say, the rain lightened up a little bit, but when I got back to the theater, man, I had all these gray spots all over this suit. Water spots. It's time to go on and do the show, man. And so on the show, we weren't soaking wet, but we were wet. Little stuff, the dumb stuff that we would do.
Yeah, I can dig it. I hear you, man. Well, you know what? I'm going to take a short pause here and do a little identification. Just let our listeners know that you are listening to Speaking of Jazz with me, Manny Kelloug, and I'm your host. I'm coming your way each week with different, new, fantastic, and exciting guests. And you never know who I'm going to have unless you tune in. Like this week, my fantastic guest is trumpeter, band leader, arranger, writer, mentor, name it. He's all of the above. Good friend of mine from years ago, Mr. Leslie Drayton, who's with me this week. You'll have to tune in next week to see who I have. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, just email me at speakingofjazz.guest@gmail.com. That's speakingofjazz.guest@gmail.com. Leave a message and we'll get right back to you. Enough said in that area. Well, let's get right back into my dear friend, Mr. Leslie Drayton. Leslie, we're back again with you, man. We're getting down to the finish point. I think I asked you earlier, what are some of the current things that your recordings or tours, are you doing any, getting ready? Are you working on any tours, or are you pretty much staying home right now?
Pretty much staying home. Things are just opening up again. We'll just see how things are gonna.
Fantastic.
My wife and I spend a lot of time traveling. It's like at that point of life now. Sometimes it's nice to just travel and not have a gig to do.
Amen. I know just what you're saying.
So we do that. We would have gone to Italy and France in the March, April. Things were still tight, so we decided we postponed that trip. It's nice to go and see what's going on in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
See if we can glean anything to bring back to apply to things. I mean, I spend most of my days. I mean, we went to the gym this morning, and I enjoy riding a bike. I enjoy walking. I'm still practicing the trumpet is still part of my daily activities.
Very good.
I write when the muse flows through me. I don't make myself write anything, and sometimes it happens in spurts. There are things. I mean, I'll do. I have an interest in things. I do a lot of reading and research on things, and then I never let a day go by that I'm not doing something constructive.
Very good. Yeah, I hear you. We gotta stay active, as they say. We're known as OGs now, man. So it's almost like I just keep trying. I'm like you. I try to keep myself busy, keep moving. Don't want to get caught up in the stiffness and stuff. You know, I'm still playing. I'm proud to say that I'm celebrating 74 this year, and this is my 61st year behind the drum set. So I'm like you. I'm very blessed, man, to be able to say things like that. You know, because a lot of the cats that we grew up and went to school with, they're no longer around. You know, so it's a blessing for us to be here, to be talking to each other after 50 years. And I thank you for being here, man. You know,
or like you say, not with us. Some are not able to play.
Yes.
One of my dearest friends, incredible drummer. His name is Raymond Pounds. Raymond.
I know Raymond. Yeah.
At Grant's Music Center. Well, Raymond doesn't play anymore. He had a stroke. He's not able to play. But his son, Jason, is one of the top hip hop producers in the world.
Really?
I think on the last Kendrick Lamar release, this one that just came out 2 or 3 weeks ago, Jason he's involved with about 7 or 8 of those tunes in some capacity. That's producer, songwriter, lyricist, performer. I mean, he is doing really, really well. And that's somebody I knew when he was a baby. So we all claim his success. And Raymond is a very proud father, and I said, well, it's like I'm that other uncle. But it's nice to see there again, just the mentoring that goes on and the success that some of the young people are experiencing. And sometimes it's nice that they come back and they ask you questions about things. There's certain things about the business that aren't new. There are a lot of things that are new. And the things that we learned along the way about how to protect your intellectual property seems to be an ongoing concern and question with how to get paid for what you do, or even have the incentive to get paid for what you do. Thankfully, I learned through all of my mentors was to own most of what I do with intellectual property, which is a nice thing. There's only one piece that I've ever recorded that I did for another record label. It was an interesting story. This was in the mid-1980. I recorded a whole album for a company called Island Records, and they decided to shelve that record. That record appeared on Spotify about 3 years ago in its entirety. I never knew that it was released.
Really?
Yeah, just all of a sudden it appeared. It's like, interesting. But I did not own the rights to that recording. I mean, I own the rights to the tunes that I wrote, but everything else, I control it, which it's not a difficult thing to do now. So there is a responsibility for young people to learn all aspects of the business, which sometimes there's a reluctance to do that. It's like, hey man, I just play and I just perform. And it's like, no. There's going to be a time when you will be a bit older and you want to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Actually, you're right at the next question that I was going to ask you. And again, Leslie, I want to applaud you, man, for being a mentor, because I do the same thing. I love being a mentor and in that program. And our young people today, we need that. We need it. And please keep it up, man. Again, thank you for being a great mentor, which I've always known you as 50 years of being a wonderful, wonderful person. Not only as a player, again, but as a deep, good person. And I applaud you for that. What advice can you give to others, up and coming musicians, singers, songwriters, recording artists, vocalists, players? What advice, you had started on it just then, what advice can you give them? Can you continue on that a little more?
One of the things I would love to do business, but I also really encourage most young people to learn the history of that thing that you have a passion about. If a person comes to me and they say, well, man, let's say drums. And I play drums. I said, what do you play? I play in church. I said, okay, cool. What do you want to do? Oh, man, I want to record and travel the world. I said, oh, really? What do you need to do that? Oh, I just need to play well. I said, well, who are some of the people that are your heroes? And there may be 2 or 3 that have been successful in the last 10 years. I said, okay, what do you know about their backstory? I don't know much about them. I said, well, what was their motivation? Who did they listen to?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I don't know. I said, well, go do your homework. If Chris Dave is your guy, who did he listen to? If Robert Glasper is your guy, and I'm talking about people that come from Houston, there's a lot of people come from Houston. Well, you've heard Glasper's last recording. Do you know that Robert Glasper was a great jazz pianist, or is? No, I didn't know that. I said, oh, he can play everything. So just don't judge him or make that your favorite restaurant, just the last thing that you heard. Glasper can do whatever. He made a conscious decision to move in another direction. So that's one of the, and then learn the business. That's another one. I mean, it always comes up, learn
the business
about what it is you're doing. My bass player that I mentor, it's like, in fact, I had to talk with him the other day. His father passed away about a year and a half ago. And I told him, I said, your dad used to come when you play with me. And your dad would look at me strange for the longest, man. Like, he wasn't quite sure of me. And I said, when your dad became ill, I said, the last time I saw him, there was another look in his eye. And I said, I don't know what discussions you guys had about me, but I'm going to tell you that look in his eye was, he was turning you over to me. And I said, so I'm that guy now. And I said, sometimes we disagree about things, and that's fine. I said, but I'm always have your best interest in mind. So he's about to go to New York. So he had no idea. He wanted to rent an apartment. He says, oh man, I can get this apartment with my friend and we're going to do that. I said, okay, that's nice. So the other day he says, do you know that where we wanted to rent the apartment, you had to show 80 times as a yearly salary? I said, so what did you do? He said, well, I had to go get some co-signers. I said, well, who co-signed? My grandmother and my mother. Okay, fine. I said, what about the other 2 in the apartment? Well, they kind of drag their feet about things. I said, yeah, okay, fine. Now you need, at the end of the year, you're going to make sure they're going to stay in the apartment. So I also told him another little thing. I said, you're going to be in New York, man. You've been in LA and you've been in Houston. I said, you're going to need a winter coat. I said, and you can't go down in Houston and get the winter coat that you need because they're not going to have them heavy enough. You got to get a coat in New York. And he was quiet, because normally I get, we have to go back and forth. I said, no, man, you'll need a winter coat. You better go look for one while they're cheap. Yes. So he is one that does quite a bit of research. But here's another funny story. One day he called me. He said, man, did you ever record on 2-inch tape? I said, yes. I said, I got a closet full of them. I said, next time you come by, I'll show them to you. He had never seen 2-inch tape. Yeah, he's 20 years old. So it's like some things we take for granted that they know, and they don't. But he was inquisitive. He said, "What does it look like?" I said, "Man, big thick tape." He said, "You can record 24 tracks on this." Why is it so thick? So I had to explain to him all of that. So it's interesting that way. He does know the history of jazz bass. He plays electric bass. I had to open the door for him. I said, "Okay, you need to go learn what Jameson did." I said, "Chuck Rainey lives in Dallas," and I told him for years. I said, "Go." I said, "Chuck's a nice cat." I said,
"Yes, he is.
You can go up and learn from Chuck." He didn't get it. Over the years, he's learned. Oh, he played with Bernard Purdie on da 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 da. I said, "Yes," and Steely Dan, and. I said, "That's why I encourage you to go and talk to Chuck." I said, "Chuck is in his 80s now. He would love to talk to you." Yeah. He's not in Houston. Now the bass player is not in Houston anymore. So it's interesting that way. Just go learn the history of what it is that you have a passion about, even if it's being a recording engineer. Learn the history of who are the great recording engineers. Did many of them, sometimes I'll ask, do any of them play an instrument? I don't know. Some of them I said, Al Smith didn't play an instrument, but so-and-so played classical violin. This one did this one. I said, "Oh, I didn't know that." I said, "That's why you need to know a little about music."
You gotta study up on it.
There was we were doing sort of a webinar for the Grammy Foundation a few months ago, and the question came up from one of the people that was listening about whether a person needed to go to college to be a musician. And I'm sort of the outlier amongst my peer group. All of them are educators. I mean, I'm an educator, yes, but I really don't operate inside that arena. So my answer was, you don't necessarily need to go to college to be a successful musician, but you do need to study music.
Right.
And none of the educators had that answer. They say, "Well, you don't know." No, but you need to study music. It's either going to be formal or informal. What I do encourage with our young African Americans is get as many degrees as you can get. At some point, you might have to pull that out of your back pocket, but you also want to get some real world experience, because that seems to be the thing that for African Americans, people resonate with your playing experience. But if you don't have the academic credential, that keeps you out of that arena. I was fortunate enough when it came to me to have both. I was approached because I had the real world experience. What I didn't like about academia is they reached out to me because I was different from them. But once I got involved in the arena, they tried to make me like them. And that didn't work. And there were many times when I had to remind them, you chose me because I was different.
Right.
If I become you, then you miss out on that thing that I have that can enhance what you do. So I would hold my ground on that. Some folks, there are other folks that can go right into academia. They can come right out of school, go teach, but they have no real world experience. What can they really share with an aspiring musician? Nothing. We've been on the road. We've been on the road broke. We've been on the road doing things at a very high level. We've experienced all levels of it, and we've also worked with people that were extremely accomplished at what they did, who may not have had formal education.
Right.
They learned what they did. You work with Billy Preston. Billy Preston is one of the greatest organists in the world.
Yes.
I had opportunity to hear him near the end of his life. We did the Grammy show, and it was a gospel, salute to gospel music, and Billy played organ. We rehearsed. Man, he sat down to the organ at the rehearsal, and I'm thinking, oh, rehearsal. He didn't make it because I think he was off. He had some medical issues he had to deal with.
Yeah.
And another great musician sat down at the organ and played organ very well. It wasn't the same. And I realized how great he really, really was at what he did. I think beyond high school, I don't know if there was much formal education with Billy, but grew up in the church.
Right.
20 years of church experience playing the organ and keyboard, et cetera, et cetera. So not to say there's a shortcut to that. There's a balance with all of that we need, but we also want to embrace that comes from formal education as well.
Well said, my man. Well said. We're down to down almost to the finishing gate, and I'm going to say maybe in 40 seconds or less. Can you tell me what jazz means to you?
Freedom.
Oh, that's deep, man. You took me there. Elaborate a little bit, Doc.
There's nothing. It is a means for you to express yourself freely. Depends on whether you're going to do it in an innovative way or one that is in a way that's of imitation. My mentors did not allow me to imitate. We'll leave it on this last thing. When I was a lot younger, I was very much influenced by Freddie Hubbard. And I was on a gig one night, and one of my elder mentors, a very good tenor saxophone player by the name of Teddy Edwards, happened to be standing in the back. And we took a break, and I went back, and man, I was very proud. I had a suit on, I'm looking good. He said, I heard you playing, man. You sound pretty good. So I said, well, thank you. He said, but what you gonna do? So there was the lesson. What you gonna do? I was.
that sounds like him too.
Oh yeah. So the deal is that depends on how you're gonna jump in, but there is freedom there. No one can actually tell you exactly what to do, and
right.
Of expression is also one that I was sharing this with my bass player, a friend of mine. I said, man, life is like this. I said, I don't care how much and we've experienced this getting this Zoom meeting done. No matter how much you plan, something can happen. I don't care how well we plan today. It never goes exactly as planned. And he was quiet on the other end. And I said, hey man, how many times have you played a solo when you played exactly every note that you wanted to play?
No. Never.
That's life. We need to have enough tools to learn how to maneuver when that thing kind of goes a little left on us or a little right on us, when it doesn't go. So you can recover from that, but right. You have to do that.
Well, jazz lovers, there you have it. There you have it. And I just have to remind you again, you have been listening to Speaking of Jazz, and with me, Manny Kelloug, I'm your host. I'm coming your way each week, giving you strong hard hitters, jazz players, vocalists, recording artists, agents, and many, many more. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, all you have to do is email us at speakingofjazz.guest@gmail.com. Again, that's speakingofjazz.guest@gmail.com. Again, this show has been brought to you by my good friend in Las Vegas, Daryl Craig Harris, Music Matters, and also from France, my good friend, Nigel J. Farmer with Jazz News Tribute. Well, my good friend, you have talked and heard from Leslie Drayton, master trumpetist, a writer, arranger, mentor, educator, arranger, a writer. He has been our special guest this week, and we hope to get him back soon. Leslie, thank you, man, so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with me. And again, I'd love to have you back again sometime. You know, man, God bless your heart, man. I can't say it any more than this, man, but man, please promise me you're going to keep on doing what you're doing, and you're going to keep mentoring, man. And most of all, you're going to keep swinging, Doc.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Again, thank you so much, man. And we're not out of time. We're going to do it again, and take care, my man. God bless again. God bless, and keep swinging. Talk to you another time, man. God bless. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you for keeping jazz alive. Don't forget to follow us on our social media channels. All the links are in the podcast description.